if I have enough time. Okay, so let me set up my timer and drink some water. Okay, speech starting in 3, 2, 1. We think that it's harmful when you tell people to convince themselves who they are when they don't actually know who they want to be or who they really are. So firstly, a few layers of setup in my speech today, then I'll only move on to my arguments. So what does this narrative of born this way looks like in this debate, right? We tell that born this way tells people that, one is subjected towards a specific gender since birth, including the majority, right? The individuals do not have the choice or ability to choose who they are or what they want to be because the narratives indoctrinate them into the idea that who I am to choose. This is just who I am from the very start, and I have no right to choose, right? This also looks like having a fixed sets of norms that constantly follow you, like gay people having an accent or a different way of interacting, right? All of these things that follows this individuals since birth. We tell that people from the LGBTQ community, then in their side, will be treated and seen as an outcast because people think that they are born different. People treat them like aliens because they do not understand how these people came to be who they are today. Right? They will only get shunned down and rejected by society, and it's truly not an outcome that we want on site government. Second, what is the narrative that government supports? Right? We tell our counterfactor today is to support a world in which individuals view their sexual identity and orientation one that is their choice and they have the bodily autonomy to do so. Our world looks like individuals having the ability to actively question who they are, explicitly who they think in what identity are they comfortable with, right? That what their traits do not define what their identity, they should subscribe to. No, sorry. First argument today, the principle of choice and the bodily autonomy. The premise of this is just that an individual's gender and sexuality or sexual orientation is one that individuals feel comfortable with. Right? That means that individuals now have a greater capacity to choose what they think who they are. Right? If you tell people that you're just naturally born this way, it just stops people from exploring and manifesting. It traps people into this identity, even if they're not comfortable with it, because you tell them that this is what you're born as. You indirectly strip away the agency of these individuals to choose who they want to be and to be more comfortable and to be more comfortable as an individual itself, right? So what our side is able to provide is then time for them to accept their own identity and explore who they truly are and who they truly want to be. And if a person is unwilling to come out of the closet, we respect that choice and not force them into a room which society gives them, right? If a LGBTQ plus individual is uncomfortable with their own identity and they do not feel proud about it, we respect that as well. This is important because of 3 reasons, right? On an individual level, we tell that individuals are able to continue to search for what they think is comfortable for them, thus enabling them to access greater avenues of self-gratification through the process of self-actualization. We also have greater empowerment that if under opposition, individuals believe that they are born this way, the impacts and the narratives of the above doctrine, which negatively affects their emotion and absence coming from government, that should a person can be able to come out of the closet proudly and appreciate themselves for who they are. Right? Thirdly, about comfort, right? Where they know the agency they have and they have a sense of security that our people are less likely to feel shameful about their own identity. This also works on the converse, in which a gay individual is not comfortable with their own identity and see it as bad. They have the choice to say that I choose to be gay, and be comfortable with their own label. Second argument today, how you generate a greater social acceptance towards different sexual identities. The premise of this is just gender identities and orientations individuals have are malleable and can be changed and decided by these individuals. The process in which we're able to get it is like when your sexual identity is one that you develop over through time and through self-realization and through the process of living through different types of experiences as a whole. Right? This is like going through different relationships with different types of people and exploring what you truly like, opening up to yourself to more experience, to more people and more journeys, and also to increase the empathy towards different identity. Right? It also looks like a lack of stereotyping where your individual traits are unable to be tied towards a specific gender group because society recognizes the fact that your gender and your orientation is malleable and is custom. Right? Lesser ability for them to relate or to even have conventional traits linked back to you. So what is the impact then on our side, and why is this important? We tell that you firstly provide greater capacity for people to self-actualize, that they're able to use time to really find out who they want to be. It's okay to be hesitant. It's okay for you to not define yourself as anything, right? It's okay that if you didn't feel this way in the past or not, but now you do, right? Your identity can still change from time to time through different experiences. And your surroundings is less likely going to make you feel pressured in our side when you owing to the fact that everyone knows that gender identity is one that is self-defined and may differ across different individuals, and because they want their identity to be respected as well. Therefore, it increases their incentive to respect other individuals as well. Before I move on, POI.
Are you okay with gay conversion therapies?
I'm sorry, you were rambling. I couldn't hear your question.
Are you okay with gay conversion therapies?
I really cannot hear you. I'm sorry. So thirdly, you tell that you're going to have a better political and social capital for a change under our side, right? A movement that's more unified and more comfortable with their own skin are more likely going to represent them better. Compared to opposition's role, where they're labeled as what they're born with and inherently margins of the society, we tell that we are better able to opt for societal change, right? There's a greater reputation of this movement itself in which they're confident of their choices and decisions gives the greater possibility for individuals to feel comfortable with themselves and their identities and to fight for the rights of their group, right? There's a greater chance of them coming out as queer and actively showing support towards their community, and therefore the movement is one that's likely going to achieve their goals and likely going to be one that is successful as a whole. So what is the comparative then, right? We tell that the world in which opposition has to defend is a world where individuals are tied to an identity for life. They do not have a choice to choose who they want to be. It is extremely detrimental because you enclose everybody to a certain role of society and believe that that's not interchangeable and you do not respect any other choice. Therefore, you decrease your capacity for people to realize. And we also that when people are unwilling to explore because you keep convincing yourself that this is just who I am and I should just follow this. This was a destiny that was given to me. For all the reason above, proud to propose.
I thank very much the Prime Minister and yield the floor now to the Leader Opposition. Just remind us to speak your positions and let us know how you'd like to receive yours. Hear, hear.
Just to confirm, am I audible and visible?
You're quite clear.
All right, I will just set my timer and then begin my speech. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel, this debate is not about whether or not people should have the choice to have a certain lifestyle, but whether or not we tell them that they're born a certain way and then they get to decide. Two major clarification right at the top. First, this narrative does not exist in a vacuum. That is to say, there are going to be other narratives like exploration and whatnot that existed in the status quo that focused on individual exploration to a large extent. But secondly, we think that this narrative needs people to not like actually make a choice, but pushes people to find out whether you are a person belonging to a certain gender identity or a sexual orientation or not. The society asks you to be a certain way, but you need to explore what your identity is, and that is important. Two major arguments then from side opposition. First, why we should not regret it, and secondly, why is it more viable to people and why the acceptance matters. Before I move on to my argument, what did side proposition give to you in the debate? Two things they talked about. Firstly, under this idea of choice as a whole. two major responses. Firstly, we do not force people to act a certain way, but then we let them decide their identity after they've known the truth and known what like is natural to them as a whole. But secondly, we think for the entire case of like choice to be true, two things needs to actually materialize into people. Two things need to be true. First, other people in general need to respect the choice as a whole. But secondly, people need to let go of their belief systems and accept you and your choice and your identity. In a society that has so much diverse diverse identities and diverse prospects, things like conservatism exist, and there's always opposing forces saying that you're not natural to society, and that's not right. It's highly unlikely that these people actually get to explore as side proposition suggests. Secondly, under the idea of how people are likelier to accept the certain way, we live in a highly heteronormative society. That is to say, a lot of people in this status quo probably think that being a certain way is something that is going to give you maximum benefit and whatnot. In these forms of prospects, there is a very less likelier chance that they are going to be accepted in society where it's just a choice as side proposition suggests as a whole. Moving on to my arguments then. Firstly, on the why we shouldn't regret it. Let us look at what has happened in the past. Three things. First, it has set a legal precedence into different governmental structures, into different legal materials and whatnot. This looks like the legalization of same-sex marriage, rights to LGBTIQ communities, and whatnot. We think that it is very much necessary that these legalized procedures have existed in terms of accepting the LGBTIQ community as a whole, but secondly, recognizing and identifying them to a larger extent. This has happened in massive Western democracies. This has happened in a lot of democracies, that do believe in providing like rights to maximum number of people. But we think that secondly, we think that it is unlikely to happen when it is just a choice because of the opposing coercive forces that exist in the status quo. We think that these opposing coercive forces, like it looks like conservative states who are probably pushing forth counter narrative so as to say that like LGBTIQ community is not something that's natural. We think that it has larger amount of power in terms of manipulating people to a larger extent. This looks like probably your religion forcing your parents to go against you even if you think that you have a certain sexual orientation. Secondly, it looks like people probably bullying you for your sexual orientation and identity as a whole. This looks like the discrimination that massively exists in the status quo. But thirdly, we think that that it is much more easier for you as a community when you have a community to fall back on, when you have a safe space that you can look into, so that you have a massive so that you can have a community that you are probably feeling supportive towards. We provide that form of supportive strength to these people. Before I move on to my second point, if there are any POIs I'd like to take.
Yes, the legal precedence that you said, just because you were born this way, is one that's inherently untrue, given the fact that people can have the ability to make choices, and these choices have been recognized by the state. This looks like smoking marijuana, this looks like having abortions. Why is it then different or exclusive that just because you are born this way, you have a greater leverage over legal precedence?
Yes, the point in time, the reason why these forms of narrative have actually existed, I'm telling in a comparative why it is unlikely to happen under your world because of all those conservative forces that I've explained in the argument itself. Secondly, why is it more viable to people as a whole? Three things under this. Firstly, because it is regarded as something that is scientific. Why is it being a scientifically proven thing important? Because of the image of science being something that is objective, because of the image that probably when it is something scientific that is aligned to the truth value of argument. It's not about whether science is actually true or false, but rather about how people perceive science as a whole. But secondly, we think that it is also about the respect that people have generally for scientifically literate people. This looks like this largely happens because of stereotypes that exist in the status quo, believing that a scientifically literate person is smarter, B, in terms of credibility that they get to a large extent. But secondly, we think that it is more reliable onto the fact that you are being born a certain way because it is something that is related to your biology, that is related to something like science to a large extent, that is related to something that is natural to you and not something that is unnatural as a whole. But thirdly, what happens when it is actually a choice? Two things. First, it becomes an unnatural choice. That is to say that a lot of people are probably going to feel that it is not something that's natural to you, that is something that's convertible. And that is when people are likely to go through conversion therapy and whatnot. But secondly, you are told to act a certain way because your happiness is probably contingent on it. Because you live in a heteronormative society in the first place, you're told to be straight, probably because that would like reduce the amount of discrimination that you have to face on a daily basis. For all those reasons, we are proud to stand on opposition. Thank you.
I thank very much the Leader Opposition. Yield the floor now to the Deputy Prime Minister. Reminder that POI is by voice. You're here.
Hi, just checking if I'm audible.
You're quite clear.
All right, thank you so much. Hi, DPM, pronouns he, him. No, actually, to be honest, no preferred pronouns, just, yep. POIs through voice as well. Love to take a POI about the 4th or 5th minute. All right, okay, sure. Speech starting in 3, 2, 1. I guess in the start of the debate, it's weird that 2 15-year-olds and 1 16-year-old person on Gov is wanting to tell you why is it that you deserve a choice in status quo. But moreover, it's one that's abhorrent to believe that you are unable to opt out of the systems of bullying and oppression that side opposition towards you in this debate because you are unable to have a choice, because you are subjected to these forms of oppression. You are justified to do so. I'm going to deal with 2 things in the speech. Firstly, whether or not it's justified in the entire principle way off in this case. Secondly, it's just to say, just hammer on the pragmatic outcomes that we're able to actually get more, given that it was never really responded to coming in from LO, but they never really showed us how is it that individuals are better off on their side of the house. Firstly, whether or not it is justified. They tell us a few things. The first is that, because you are born this way, that means to say there's a legal precedence in which you're just able to actually just help yourself and you're just able to actually, get legalized and get recognized by society. The first thing is to note, I do not get why this form of like narrative is one that's exclusive towards you actually having some form of legal precedence. I think there have been sufficient instances where individuals are able to actually show that they have made an active choice and the one that's rational that ought to be actually recognized by the state. That means to say that people who actually opt for abortions, people who actually opt to drink, to smoke, to actually smoke weed, all of these things are deemed as stuff that people sometimes are going against conventional social norms, but are still legally recognized by the state because it is one that is a rational choice in this case. That means to say that the legal precedents that side of opposition wanted to talk about and to support this was one that's already flawed inherently, given that there was no exclusivity analysis to show to you why is this so. Secondly, they tell you the main claim coming from their side is that conservative states are going to tell you and going to bully you and impose a lot of harms onto you because they believe that this is a choice, because they believe that they can change. Before that, no. Gov just takes a stance directly against gay conversion therapy because the reimagination on our side allows the narrative and shows the narrative that individuals are able to actually choose what type of gender identity and orientation they can mean. That means to say that we do not support the fact that other individuals are able to actually determine who you are or are able to actually change what you believe and what you see yourself as. That means to say conversion therapy is an imposition of choice. We do not support it to be principally consistent on side of government. But moreover, opposition also concedes that the world doesn't really support people actually being imposed onto some form of narrative in this case. That means to say we do not really get what the comparative is. And moreover, notice the logical gaps in which opposition shows you that just because it's a choice, people are going to bully you. Firstly, people on opposition's worst case still bully you regardless. If they really wanted to talk about historical precedents, that means to say that people who tell that they are born this way, that they are gay in this way, that means to say that they still are often actually imposed and suppressed towards harms on gay conversion therapy or societal narratives that deems them as inferior, that deems them as disgusting individuals in society. We agree that it's one that's harmful. The comparative on Gov Finish Socio that Bernice has showed you in her PM speech was one that directly tailors into this comparative. The comparative fits best into our narrative when we tell you that individuals are able to actually choose what form of orientation they are. The converse is that a gay person who is unlikely going to feel comfortable in their own identity is able to also have the choice to opt out of the system and tell everyone else that they are straight, that they believe that they want to actually love other people from different genders. All of these things are applicable on our side of the house comparatively, we are able to actually opt out of these systems of bullying more on our side of the house. Lastly, on safe spaces, I just do not really see why is it that safe spaces are unable to actually accrue on side of government, given that gay people who believe that they are actually who believe that they are happy and proud of their identity are still able to form these support structures around people around them. The comparative on our side is one that's better off, because people are able to actually actively go and seek out these support structures rather than being coerced that because you're gay, you actually should belong in these gay support groups, because they are the only avenues in which you are able to actually feel happy. Comparatively, we have your choice on our side of the house. Before I move into weighing, yes, I'll take a point.
Given that this is a retrospective motion, it is not sufficient for you to say that these things could have happened on your side. For you to sufficiently regret this motion, you also have to show why it is unlikely that these things are enough and that you would have had better changes on your counterfactual.
All right, sure. I'll engage with the pragmatics, given the fact that I will never really expand upon the impacts to which you're able to actually get it comparatively. But sure, let's talk about the next thing that they've told you about narrative that it's unnatural and the pragmatic outcomes that they come into it. Before that, the weighing to the principle. I think the principle that we brought you is the one that is a principle of choice, that individuals are able to actually feel comfortable in who they are, that they're able to actually express themselves for who they are, that they're able to actually feel proud and have dignity over their own self-identity, instead of being imposed onto narratives and imposed onto labels that they never really consented to. This entire narrative and this entire principle was never weighed against by LO. Without it is one that's important, because the greatest capacity for an individual and a minority community to actually be able to exercise their own happiness is often or not exclusively through these forms of narratives and through these forms of principles. That means to say that so long we give them the ability for them to actually change who they are, or to actually give them the ability to decide who they are, they're more likely to express their own self in happiness. They're more likely to feel empowered. They're more likely to feel comfortable. Comparatively, I think on a way of thinking who's better off and who's happier, given that side of opposition never really showed you how is it able to actually just get happiness on their side exclusively. We're able to show you how it's comparatively greater on our side when individuals do not feel suppressed and do not feel stressed out by the identity that people imposed onto them. The next thing they tell in pragmatics is that the narrative that is natural, that means to say that people are less likely going to oppose it in this case. I think it's just firstly, the reality is one that is absolutely tailored by society, which individuals often do not attempt to. That means to say the change on our side is that people do not feel this as one that is natural. They feel the choice that an individual make as a queer person to actually change to be straight or to change to be a trans person is one that's legitimate, is one that still fits under the societal context. That means to say the narrative of naturality is one that's non-existent on side of government. But why is the comparative that we tell you in terms of pragmatic outcomes? Because PM has already told you a few layers in which you are able to actually just remove a large amount of things. This looks like firstly, the narrative that opposition tells us that people are not going to impose any form of narratives or labels onto you just because of who you are. I think PM directly contends to this with the fact that given that individuals are now actually fixed to a societal identity, that they cannot opt out of it. All of their actions and traits are decided by the individuals around them. That people and your friends around you say that just because you look girly, you deserve to be a trans woman instead of a man. That means to say that all of these things often revolve because you're unable to opt out of it. Number one, the change in which we're able to get is just firstly a lack of stereotyping, where individual traits are unable to be tied to one specific gender. That means to say is one that's tailored towards you as an individual exclusively. It's one that's comparatively greater because you do not feel pressured just because you're a trans woman and do not feel girly, just because you're a trans woman and you do not love dolls. All of these things change on our side, where individuals are less coerced into subscribing to these societal narratives comparatively. That means to say that we're able to actually deliver the fact that the greatest comfort on individuals is one that is able to be accrued on side of government. The second thing we tell you that's one that's important is the opening up towards these different forms of gender identities. That means to say that people who are unsure about their own gender identity, who are unsure about their orientation, are able to actually realize the fact that, they can try different things in life. They can try having different partners in order to find out what's best for them. That means to say we give them the liberty to actually self-actualize. They're able to actually use this time to find out who they really are and are able to actually feel comfortable over themselves. All of these things lead to exclusively that individuals are able to feel more comfortable and greater on our side. But lastly, on the way off into pragmatic outcomes, I think Bernice has already told you why is it that the movement who is actually more unified, who is actually confident, who is one that actively imposes themselves and their identity to feel proud, is more likely to garner better reputation in these individuals. That gay individuals are more likely to come out because they believe that is one that's confident. That means to say all of the benefits in which actually we're able to deliver social change in the long term is comparatively weighed off on side of government, when individuals feel happy, when individuals are content, when individuals are able to subscribe to this movement and fight for change willingly on our side of the house. Very, very proud to propose, very proud to stand for a gender identity for individuals. Thank you very much.
I thank very much the Deputy Leader and yield the floor to the Deputy Prime Minister and yield the floor to the Deputy Leader to conclude the substantives. Here.
Audiovisual confirmation, if that's possible.
You're quite clear.
Cool. Again, just to reinstate, I'll be taking my POIs either through the chat or through like visual indications. As long as you don't interrupt me, it's perfectly fine. My gender pronouns are he, they. Other pronouns are perfectly fine as well. I'll let you know when I begin. All right, I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. If there was ever a description of heteronormative, I would consider that DPM speech to be pretty close to the perfect definition. They try to fiat out and say that the comparative is a regret motion. The comparative in a regret motion would be a certain way without analyzing why it is likely going to be that way. The comparative was not you getting empowered to have more exploration or whatever they want to talk about, but rather the extenuation of doubt and suspect that society imposes and extends upon the LGBT community as a whole. Because let's look at the narratives of choice that exist within the status quo. The narrative of choice that religious leaders push onto you in the status quo is that you can only be a part of a religion if you can choose to not be a part of your community that you see as your own, your queerness that you see as your own. If you can choose between a gay relationship and a straight relationship, society always coerces you in order for you to choose the straight relationship instead. All of these considerations are the necessary comparative that they have to defend. They cannot cherry pick with regards to what is choice and what is not the narrative of choice. This is why the difference created by the absence of this narrative was devastating, because after making the almost impossible decision of coming out, proposition did not even let them have control over that self. The choice they wanted to argue then looks like you choose to be this way. You can choose to do these things, to become something else. You can choose to be influenced by the West. You can choose to marry and settle down, or you can choose to never have kids, because all of these immoral, unnatural choices are your choices. And if you choose the correct way of life, the natural way of life, everything is going to be okay. Those are the sorts of narratives that they push under their side. Let them not convolute what your actual choices being pushed in this debate are. This was where the narrative that we created made the most difference. It allowed for individuals to push back and to be able to seek solace in expressing the identity that they were told to repress, because that is who they were. That is who I am. This is what helps you and gives you the solace when you're already crippling with self-doubt. They consider the act of coming out as something that is inherently negative. They consider it to be a vile process where you are conflicted with your own identity. I say it's the most empowering process in the life of an LGBT community, even if you get confused later on, because the acknowledgement that you're fighting against your oppression is a very fundamentally empowering choice in and of itself. I don't think side proposition have ever contested with that. I think they need to at will. Proposition ignores that as members of the LGBT community, you're already conditioned in the vast majority of instances to doubt yourself. The change of this debate happens in the past. The comparative is the 60s, when LGBT was just coming out. Could not be people can pick and choose what your gender identity is. This debate also takes place in places like Saudi Arabia, where if you empower the notion that this is a choice, the choices that get pushed onto you and imposed onto you is necessarily a choice that compels you to not choose the lifestyle of queerness that you identify as your own. This is the necessary comparative that you have to defend on proposition. It was not just likely to hold water. Society doesn't even recognize the alternative possibilities of gender, let alone hold the capacity to recognize people being able to choose their own gender, simply because of the fact that this knowledge did not exist in the past in the 60s, and it continues to not exist in the vast majority of cases throughout anywhere besides the Western liberal democracies, where their case would probably conveniently manifest. Before moving on, I'll take your point.
Yes, why should a gay person be subjected to bullying when they are able to opt out of this community identity by saying that they're straight, by saying that they do not identify as queer, and are able to find solace in themselves that's not contingent upon the community surrounding them?
Yeah. All right. I got your point. The difference here is that you're assuming this pretext that the gay person will be happier when they choose to be straight, when they choose to repress their own identity that they seek as their own, when they choose to not date the person who they genuinely love, when they choose to not marry the person who they genuinely love, because you think that it is inherently a choice. I do not think it is a choice. Secondly, then, this very idea that this is a choice is a heteronormative narrative in and of itself. This is principally unjust because you label a certain identity or a certain or a certain like you label one identity as inherently natural, right? You label that if you just turn straight, you will not get bullied because that's the natural way of being. That's the natural way of being in the first place. You don't need to get bullied so long as you're not choosing to be gay and hence getting bullied. You victim blame in those instances. Your entire case, in fact, has been one of victim blaming. But the third impact of this very narrative of you not wanting to choose to get bullied is you're also less likely to reach out to the wider LGBT plus community because you think that the choice of leaving your family or leaving your friend circle who bullies you to be with the community is actually a fair choice. And this is where I want you to use your intuition in this debate very exceptionally, because recognize what the imposition of choice from a heteronormative society is towards the individuals within the LGBT plus community. The imposition of choice, such as from people such as like political commentators such as Ben Shapiro, is that you can't be Jewish if you're gay. Like, how would you reconcile that with your religion? If you truly think that you're Jewish, you should choose to change your lifestyle of gayhood. You should choose to change your queerness because that is a legitimate choice in the eyes of the conservatives. Their side empowers that sort of narrative. They cannot have this debate in a vacuum where they fiat their way out of everything that exists within reality. But then the final thing that they note in terms of why choices are like probably going to be fair is that societal narratives have shifted in order to accommodate for other choices such as weed legalization. I just want you to like think about the scales to which LGBT people are oppressed when contrasted with people who smoke weed. I think if you smoke weed, you're likely to just be called like a hippie. When you according to their side choose to be gay, you're likely to get stoned to death in Afghanistan. I think there's a massive difference in scale of oppression. But then secondly, the stereotype still exists for weed smokers, right? Just because it's legal doesn't mean the stigma like disappears all of a sudden. In Nepal, like gay people get lynched in villages every single day. It's perfectly legal to be gay under our side. What have we done better that this, why is this narrative better in terms of what we've done? Because number one, we allowed for many people to opt into it, given that scientific consensus exists at a point in time where scientific consensus exists. Use all of Rodin's mech to recognize why it gains legitimacy, at least in the eyes of the state. In the absence of this narrative, what you get is you get transgender people who need special healthcare for things like hormone substitutions, not getting that healthcare facility because taxpayers can tell you that you should choose to be cisgendered because the impact of your transgenderness on their taxpayers' money is inverse. We were never willing to stand for that sort of oppression imposed upon you by a heteronormative society. We're very proud to oppose.
I thank the deputy leader and yield the floor to the government whip. Reminder, that's POIs by voice. Hear, hear.
I'm audible.
You're quite clear.
All right, thank you. POIs verbally pronounce the day. All right. Speech starting in 3, 2, 1. If this debate was about choice, our side wins it. If this debate is about happiness that is built on the ability to make a meaningful choice for yourself, we also win it. There's no ground for opposition to win this debate at all. We're very proud to propose. A couple of things to clarify before we move on to the two clashes. The first, on which side better maximize the ability for individuals to self-actualize, hence be happier. Second, which side better promotes positive change. But before that, couple of layers of clarification. The first is that proposition in this debate can fear that the narrative will exist, and therefore the arguments PM and DPM, specifically Bernice and Yangmi, made about how individuals are able to feel empowered still stands. There was simply zero engagement from that literally 14 minutes of their opposition speeches. They're simply reluctant to engage with this. Second, I want to know this is a retrospective motion, which means to say that a narrative equally impacts on everyone, regardless who you are. Henceforth, it is incredibly ridiculous for opposition to tell us that they grew up in an environment that the states are coercive, that the states are incredibly conservative, and even gave us the example of how Jews must be straight because all the individuals exist, because all the individuals around them believe in that, and there's an extremely strong peer and there's a very strong societal pressure. That does not exist in the R side of the House panel, because we've already clearly analyzed to you that there's a clear incentive shift on all these people on the ground, all these individuals surround them, because now they're more likely to think that literally it is all right for you to not be straight. It's all right for you to not identify yourself and fix yourself or label yourself to a specific gender identity, and you can be non-binary, and all these things do exist, and it's literally legitimate, and we're all fine with that. That is our comparative panel. Means to say we have to assume that this particular narrative will equally impact everyone. It will come to fruition. If not so, this debate cannot happen in the first place. First and second opposition was incredibly disingenuous. Therefore, their comparative is not our comparative. Our comparative is a world to which individuals are rewired to think that is in a completely different way. This looks like individuals will think that gender is individual defined instead of societal defined. Therefore, you allow individuals to choose, and you also increase the revenue for them to actually respect each other, because they also wish to respect back. I'll take you at 5. The first clash, therefore, which side better maximizes the ability for individuals to attain self-gratification? The POI was basically, you have like gay conversion therapies, but literally was dropped after that POI because they knew it was unstrategic. But let's tackle that regardless. Firstly, I'll suggest that this is just ridiculous, because the counterfactor we support is not other individuals being able to force you to convert your gender and do things that you do not like. It literally looks like the church is not allowed, and the church is not allowed to literally convert you from a gay person back to a straight person. That does not exist. What we support has been already made extremely clear from the start. It's to break the narrative that individuals have the ability to choose, and also because the prerequisite towards other people respecting their own choices for them is to actually respect other people back. Therefore, all the individuals will do the same thing. Therefore, it's unlikely for them to do so. But also, if coercion occurs, as what already reflected in status quo, when you forcefully force someone to do things they do not like, things, for example, rape and other things that do not involve consent, all these things can be sued to court, which means to say the criminal justice system's intervention is justified in this particular case. Individuals do not have the incentive to do these things whatsoever in this debate. But why is this important? How do we better maximize the ability and the utility of happiness? Firstly, we allow for gratification. A couple of mechanisms to this. The first is the ability for you to choose, and of itself already enables the ability for individuals to feel happy for themselves, because they choose to respect, because they feel that they're respected. This is quite intuitive, because the fact that you're able to choose to do the things in your own way independently already makes you happy, compared to that when you're younger, when you have to listen to all of your parents' words, and that makes you feel less happy. The second is that being who you are also allows you to be happy about it. Thirdly, it's the ability to shift from time to time. You might think that for now, this particular gender is the best for you, but in the future, because your perception shifts, because the things that impacts on you shift, therefore, you having the ability to shift in that particular sense is also a very important factor for you to feel happier about it. You're not fixed in a pedestal. You're not fixed in an echo chamber. You cannot opt out on the side of opposition. We gave you an entire layer of analysis to why there's an incentive shift on it. They need to tell us why that's untrue before even contending on our principle. The side of the House and opposition, there's no ability for the truth. That's their comparative, by the way. No ability from the feel happy, no ability from the change and shift. Clearly, if you feel attracted to a man and if you're afraid because you're afraid of social ostracization, therefore you will not come down on the opposition side of the House. And that of itself, because you're literally suppressing your identity, that basically denies your ability to access happiness. The second, so how does a lack of agency power actually empower the person? Unclear, but also they're more likely to expose these individuals to harm so long if they think they're their identity is not fixed to what society defines. Therefore, therefore, just impose individuals with much more significant amounts of harm under the other side of the house. The conclusion to this simple cited proposition clearly wins on the ability for individuals to self-actualize and maximizes utility for happiness. Second question, though, on how which side is more likely to get positive change. I'm sorry, I cannot take you. So firstly, they talked about things that are completely inexclusive in this case panel. They talked about how the states are conservative, the social stigmas and stereotypes that actively discriminate against these individuals. This applies to magically on the both sides of the house. The comparative, therefore, is not about these issues that applies magically, because this is washed. The debate is then about how do we better solve it. So we say it's our side of the house, because you no longer feel ashamed of your identity, because you no longer feel ashamed that you no longer feel ashamed about yourself. Therefore, there's a direct incentive to get out of the closet or to do the things that you like. But moreover, the fact in which other individuals also feel the hence there's a direct incentive from the respect to you as well, which means that you're more likely to have communities to support you on our side of the house. Moreover, you also have the ability to access things like, to find a community that you like and just stay with them. All these things exist on our side of the house. But even in the absolute worst case on our side of the house, where these individuals fail, we think it's comparatively better to the other side of the house, because it sets a precedence to the future generations that have yet to come, which means to say the foundation of the fight towards inequality or towards gender equality has already been set up. It looks like you give more experience, you pass on your experiences and your knowledge towards these younger people, and therefore they will continue to fight. Even in the absolute worst case, when none of these happens, we think it's better on our side, because comparatively there are more safety cushions available for these individuals to cushion on when they fail. At the very end of the day, panel, our side of the house is the house that exclusively protects these individuals to the greatest extent, because we not only equip these individuals with the ability to self-actualize and feel good and feel happy out of themselves, but also there is a more sustainable and it's more positive change exclusively on our side of the house. For the very last time, for Chongli and for all the people that support us, we're very proud to propose.
I thank very much the proposition with, and I yield now the floor to the opposition with to conclude the debate proper, but not the debate as a whole. Here.
Just a sec. I'll just set up my timer. I'll be taking POIs through the chat or through visual. I prefer gender pronouns I, he, or they. I will be turning on my video. Just tell me if I'm visible and audible.
You are indeed.
Okay, so I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. The moment when people engage with the narrative of being born a certain way is when they have some level of doubt about their own identity. They go onto a page that talks about LGBT issues and they see that some people are born a certain way, and then they're forced to re-evaluate who they are, and the doubts are cleared, and their doubts regarding their sexuality are also affirmed in many instances. On their side of the house, the clear comparative is that when they go onto that news outlet, they see that being gay is completely a choice. You increase the doubt in this amount of doubt in these people, and that is the extent to which this debate works. I don't think that opposition in this debate has to support the fact that LGBT movements are going to go around people and ostracize them for not being gay. I think we need to force people to act like a gay person on the outside the house. I think that LGBT movements all around the world recognize that people sometimes want to live in the closet for their own reasons, and it's completely fine. The only difference is that on the outside the house, these LGBT organizations at least give out the truth upon which people can later base the decisions upon. I'm going to talk about 3 things in my speech. Firstly, on the idea of scientific backlash and engagement within the movement. Secondly, on the idea of choice and how people interact with it. Thirdly, on the idea of exploration and how do you have it on the outside of the house. Firstly, the scientific backlash, and it's very important. I'm going to talk about 2 things within this. Firstly, the idea is that people don't think that being gay is a choice in the current status quo. I think even in the past, the first pioneers of the LGBT movement knew that some people were born certain way, hence they act certain way, and that is completely fine. I think the moment you try to introduce this idea that no, some people choose to be a certain way, I think you go into direct contradiction with the scientific community. You have more internal contradiction within your movement, meaning that people are less likely to take you seriously when you're quarreling among yourself as to what your stance is. But secondly, and in terms of backlash, in terms of scientific backlash, I don't think that anyone can be convinced with the argument that someone would choose to be gay. in a conservative society or even in a normal society, because being gay is something that's hard. Being gay is something that puts you at a disadvantage in the society. So it's unclear. So it would be unclear to a general person as to why someone would choose to be gay. So it's harder for people to convince that thing as well. But on the outside the house, we can clearly tell people that some people are gay because of things like brain structure, because of things like that, hormones and stuff like that. This is easier to sell to people because people believe in science in the first place. This is easier to tell to people. It's easier to tell people that someone is like this because of certain things, and these certain things are proved through empirical observation, and that this is the truth, and that you should model your way of viewing the world upon this truth. I think it's easier to sell people this idea rather than selling other things. But secondly, on how do people interact with choice, and this is the bulk of their case. Their idea is that that LGBT movement was going to go and tell people to respect choices, and that would somehow mean that the world is changed. I don't think that people respect choices. I think they have to show us that people are going to respect choices. We gave you a few reasons as to why people don't respect choices. Firstly, the idea that society wants people to act a certain way because that's the right thing to do as per religions, or it's a religious thing to do, or they might probably think that it's a scientific way to do, or whatnot. So those are the instances in which people don't accept the choices. I'm not allowed to eat beef in my home because my choice to eat beef is considered non-religious. My choice to kill animals is considered immoral. So what does society do under their side? Number one, they don't care about choices because if the choices have some sort of cost associated with them, meaning that under their side house, medicine needed for transgender surgery is simply seen as cosmetic surgery because that's a choice that someone is taking, not a basic need. So you don't have things like this occurring under their side house. But secondly, and pushed from the very beginning, was the idea that people are going to force you to take a better choice. The idea is that parents and other people, or even your friend circle, see that there is a benefit in being heterosexual. There's benefit in terms of getting jobs, benefit in terms of not getting discrimination. The world is a better place for heterosexuals. Sad fact, but it's true. So in that instance, parents on their side of the house would force children to take this kind of surgery because parents don't care about choices. They make choices for the children. They're going to make choices that they see is right, and these parents who don't know about these issues are probably going to think that this particular conversion therapy is a right thing to do. Before I move on, I'll take the POI, please.
If our world on side of government is one that's extremely discriminatory, why would people come out your side of the world? But moreover, if a person chooses to be gay on opposition's case, would they no longer be subject to these forms of oppression?
So there was like two questions within your POI. I'm going to answer both. Then firstly, why would people come out? I think on the outside, people would come out because they would not have doubts about who they are. They would be affirmed in the belief that they would want this way and they can do nothing to change it. So they would come out. But secondly, as to how things change, I'm describing that exact thing right now. How do we change things on the outside? I think on the outside, the key difference is that society can't force you to be a certain way. They can't, override your choices because it's futile. Because it's futile to go against the laws of nature, against literal scientific facts. So I think you force society to accept things as reality. Parents are forced to accept that a child will never be straight and that they will be gay and that they have to model their own way of viewing the world around it. This looks like how people change the way they view the way the way gender work in terms of how people change how Pope changed the stance of Catholic Church in terms of gay rights, when he said that some people are born a certain way, and it's right. You model your society around them, but you also have legal rights because now these things aren't. Now the cause that comes with being gay, for example, being discriminated and having certain surgery costs, are seen as basic needs because those are things that you couldn't control and you weren't responsible for them. More affirmative action and better healthcare for all. But also on the idea of exploration, and this was a context that people are not going to explore. I think that most LGBT individuals have a hunch, and when they have a hunch, I think you need to nudge them towards the right choice because society is masking their sense of sexuality and gender. I think on our side of the house, we tell them to uncover what we think because that's the truth. On their side, yes, you let them choose what the hunch is. You tell them that probably they might be gay or they might not be gay, and probably they are going to have more doubts. They're going to have a bad life, but they are going to choose what's beneficial to them within the society. Because notice that if someone had the ability to choose to be born as straight, probably people would choose that because of the benefits that these people have. So people are not going to explore on their side. People are going to stay within their closet. But on the outside, these people are going to explore. They're going to have a better life. But the community as a whole is also going to grow because you have more people coming in because of the fact that they accept their life as it is. I think we have been very clear on the idea of choice. We have been very clear on how movement as a whole can engage with the general public, but we have also been clear as to how it affects the individual who has opted into both of these narratives. I think owing to these three reasons, we win this debate. Proud to oppose.
I think the opposition would very much invite the opposition reply to conclude the opposition bench. Here.
Again, audio and visual confirmation, if that's fine. Am I audible and visible?
You are.
All right. Again, I'll let you know when I begin. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. A boy decided to come out to his friends when he was, I don't know, 13, 14, something like that. And that boy is right here in this debate. I'm not going to name who it is, but like they exist here, they can hear me. When this boy came out, he got bullied intensely in school. What side proposition would then tell that boy is they would tell him to come out as straight again. Just say it was a prank. Just say it was a choice that you made. You thought it would be funny. You thought it would be fun. You thought it'll be whatever. They told that boy that it's a choice that you make, that you're gay or you're bisexual or you're whatever. It's a choice that you make, that you decided to get bullied. It's a choice that you made, that you are not the victim of your crime, of your oppression. You're the culprit of your own oppression. That is the sort of choices that they imposed upon you or upon that boy. Two strategic observations. Number one, they choose their entire counterfactual to exist within a vacuum, where choice was seen as the holy grail of respect, wherein societal coercions never existed. They can't just tell us that they would have the narrative of choice. They have to tell us why the choice is likely to be a free choice, why the choice is likely to be a choice that is accepted by your parents or by your pastors. We've always seen this sort of we've always seen queerness as an unnatural thing. We've always seen queerness as something that is immoral in and of itself. But secondly, they also had to tell us why in that rejection from the pastor, you are now able to have the same solace of being natural within your body under their side that we get under our side. Because under our side, the narrative is simple. You're born with this. You cannot change this. The pastor who's trying to change you is inherently making an oppressive and illegitimate statement because of the fact that you are born with this. Under their side, that legitimacy of you being a queer person gets lost. It gets dissolved because the pastor can realistically claim that this is a choice and that you should make the correct choice, the choice of God, the choice that your mom approves of, the choice that you should not be with the boy that you love. Second strategic observation then, their impacts hurt their own case more than it hurts ours. If a gay person is uncomfortable, they say that the gay person can come out as straight. Firstly, ridiculous. But secondly, I want you to understand why that gay person was uncomfortable in the first place. It is because of the oppression of queer people. Within healthcare, for instance, where transgender people are now told that their surgery is similar to a cosmetic surgery because it's a choice that they made to look a certain way, to be a certain way, to have a certain gender identity. It's not seen as a basic right. It is narratives within religion that I've already talked about that forces you to be uncomfortable within your own skin. What they then did in top of this like sort of oppression is that they empowered the bigoted narrative that this is your choice and that your choice is intrinsically wrong, that your choice is intrinsically entrenched in the immorality of queerness. We were never for that oppression. What did we at least give to you? We at least gave queer people the strength insofar as you accept that being gay is natural. You accept that when you come out, you're doing so not because it was a confused choice, but because you're definitive in your identity, in the etching of your skin and in the making of your body, or that you have the solace to live within your own natural self. We think that that was something that side proposition could never realistically account for within this debate. But we also told you that the levers of structural change is something that favors our side more than it favors theirs. Because realistically, what's the comparative under their side? When you go to a healthcare professional and you say that you want to use taxpayers' money to pay for your transgender surgery. It's definitely not the taxpayers being okay with it. It's definitely not the taxpayers seeing it as an intrinsic and basic human right that you should be allowed to go undergo that surgery. It is likely that they'll say, oh no, this is a choice that you bought upon yourself. It is likely that they'll say the hormones that you want should also come from your own money. Those are the sorts of like oppression that changes under our side at a point in time where you tell parents, no, it's not their choice. This is who they are. You have to accept them as who they are, because if you don't, you're going to lead them to their own graves where they can't get the surgery. We're very proud to oppose.
I thank very much the opposition reply and yield the floor to the opposition reply to conclude the opposition bench and indeed the debate as a whole. Hear, hear.
Hi, just checking if I'm audible again.
Yep, you're quite clear.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, opposition, for the very, very great debate. I really enjoyed debating against one of the best debaters in the Nepalese circuit. And again, I'd really like to thank my coaches and my teammates for these 2 weekends of training and intensive preparations. Thank you so much for being a support structure. And I hope this is a very good send-off to the entire ASDC. Thank you so much. Speech starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel. Oppression exists on both sides. That the queer community in Southeast Asia is still going to be under threat of lynching as well on side of opposition. That the boy himself...
We'll pause there.
Guys, mute yourselves.
I'll just wait a second to confirm they are muted, and then we'll just re-begin the speech since it was at 13 seconds.
I just removed them. You can continue.
Thanks.
all right, so it's all right. I could start again right now.
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much. Okay. Yeah, just pretend I said those thanks just now again. Thank you so much. Speech starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel. Oppression exists on both sides. That the Southeast Asian queer community is still going to be under threat of lynching as well inside of opposition. That just because they come out as gay, people are still not going to accept them. That the boy himself in Nepal understands that if he chooses to be straight or assimilate, he knows that he's not going to be bullied by his friends. That the people around him cannot tie his own actions and traits to being queer. That is able to minimize the harms to himself instead of being lynched by homophobes and being marginalized by their community. That you know that the people around you are more likely to understand that choice is one that's proud, is better, is one that's able to deliver you happiness comparatively. We agree that people might be doubted about their identity on both sides, but I tell you, in letting them, removing the doubt and by opting out of this confusion, compared to you locking them to a singular cell and telling them that this is their home, is one that's comparatively greater on our side. The world in which Gov supports is that individuals know and are aware about their identity, and their identity is one that's malleable and can be changed in their own preference. That means we agree the narratives exist, but the way it manifests is should be contended. But the incentive for people to opt in on Gov ought not be dismissed by side of opposition, but they responded thoroughly. We got none. So 3 things I want to engage my speech. Firstly, is it justified? Secondly, what's better for this individual? And lastly, what's better for delivering social change? And the total way off under the worst case that we're unable to do so, what are we able to get? Is it justified? The opposition case, no, that never contended to the fact that choice is the most important way for individuals to feel proud. Because the only thing they tell you was that, the individuals repress themselves and then people around them victim blame, hence they feel bad about their identity. The fact that both sides have oppression and both sides are symmetrical, opposition has to show us how they solve it or let them feel less oppressed. Moreover, we tell you comparatively on Gov, is that we actually able to allow them to prevent this form of homophobia, to prevent this form of bullying for themselves if they feel oppressed by opting out of it. That means to say, maybe under the worst case that some people repress themselves, comparatively, all of the analysis that Bernice and I have already told you down the bench gives you greater chance for people to access their choices and to feel happy and content with their own identity and dignity. They're able to actually feel relieved and liberalized as an individual who are able to actually access happiness. At best, we get happiness and the ability for them to actualize as an individual with a unique identity. At worst, we minimize the harms. Like, yes, we have to accept that maybe some people would choose not to be gay on side of government, even if they feel they are. But if it means that they are better protected, it's still better for them on our side of the house, given the fact that the comparative that Op had to defend was them being bullied for their entire lives for being gay. Secondly, what's better for this individual? Opposition tells you that somehow you're able to get solace and all all that stuff. Government already contended to the exclusivity of you having support structures, but moreover, the contention that we weigh in this debate was that an individual was able to access their form of happiness. That means to say that they do not need to accept the fact that they're gay or queer, but they are able to accept the fact they might not be. That if they are happier in this case that they do not subscribe to being a queer individual, that means to say they're able to actually choose their own happiness. The case in which Gov tells you is one that is far greater, when an individual knows that they're able to access these choices in their lives, that they're able to understand the fact that being because of their identity and just because of their traits doesn't mean that society can label them as part of a unique identity. Individuals are able to independently seek solace for themselves regardless of their status because they can choose. That they're able to feel comfortable in their identity with trying out different preferences. This maximizes happiness at best. But panel, even if they cannot be happy, the discrimination, the overt pressure that people impose onto them on stereotypes was never a contended to by side of opposition. We tell you one that is extremely important that we solve this when individuals are no longer tied to their identity just because there are certain traits. Comparatively, we minimize the harms, we maximize happiness for individuals on both sides now. Opposition cannot get solace, cannot get betterment for individuals. We think we already win on individuality. The last thing they tell you was that you're able to actually better deliver social change just because you had legal precedents. I think we already contended to the fact, like the truisticness or the exclusiveness, just because it's one that's natural that people are able to actually accept it. But sure, we found in government that structural reasons why you actually deliver change better, that the movement is seen as a choice that people feel proud of, that represents the choices of pride that people have actively made in order for them to feel happy. You're more likely to increase buy-in. You're more likely to increase solace for individuals who feel comfortable of actually coming out. You increase the possibility in which they're able to actually accept themselves under the case of side of government. Sure, even if we are unable to accrue change, I'm unsure why is it that Op is able to get societal acceptance because it never really contended the fact, the truisticness of it. But sure, we win on individuality. We're able to ensure the fact that these individuals are able to be happy, are able to be content with their lives, and are no longer being able to be bullied. Thus, we are very, very proud to propose for the one last time at ASDC. Thank you very much.
Thanks to all debaters for what was